The doctor grabbed my arm and said, "If we don't take your son into surgery within the next hour, he may not survive," and in that instant my entire world collapsed. My 8-year-old son, Ethan, lay unconscious behind those hospital doors while machines kept him breathing, and I stood there praying that this wouldn't be the last day I ever heard him call me Mom. The surgeon placed the consent forms in my trembling hands before quietly explaining that my insurance wouldn't cover the emergency procedure and that the hospital needed a large payment immediately. I emptied every dollar from my savings account, maxed out my credit cards, sold the jewelry my late grandmother had left me, and borrowed everything my closest friends could send. But I was still thousands of dollars short. Desperate, I called the only people I thought would never let me down, my wealthy parents. They had always told me, family helps family, and I believed them. Through tears, I explained that Ethan needed emergency surgery, that he might die without it, and that I would repay every cent if they could just help me save their grandson. My mother listened in silence before calmly saying, "Sweetheart, we can't. We've already said that. Money aside for your sister's dream wedding." Honestly thought she was joking. I begged her to listen, reminding her that this wasn't about a vacation or a new car. It was about her grandson's life. My father took the phone from her and coldly replied, "Your sister has waited years for this wedding. We aren't taking money away from her because you failed to prepare for emergencies." Then he hung up. I stood frozen in the hospital hallway, staring at the dark screen of my phone while nurses rushed past me. At that moment, I realized something I had spent my entire life refusing to admit. My sister had always been the golden child, and no matter how much I sacrificed or how hard I worked, I would always come second. Looking through the glass at my little boy lying helpless on that hospital bed, I wiped away my tears and made myself one silent promise. If Ethan survived this night, I would never ask my parents for anything again, because one day, they would learn exactly what it felt like when the person you love most chooses someone else over you. I still couldn't accept what had happened, so the next morning I walked into my parents' house hoping there had been some misunderstanding. My mom looked at me like I was interrupting something important, while my dad barely looked up from his coffee. My sister sat at the kitchen island flipping through wedding magazines, laughing as if my son's surgery wasn't hanging over our heads. I asked them one last time if they could help me. I didn't ask for luxury or gifts. I didn't ask them to cancel the wedding. I simply begged them to loan me enough money so my son could have the operation without drowning us in debt. My mother sighed and said, "You always make everything about yourself." My father added, "Your sister only gets married once." Those words hit harder than anything I'd ever heard. My little boy was lying in a hospital bed connected to machines, and somehow a designer venue mattered more than his life. I left without another word. But before I reached my car, I heard them laughing inside the house. That sound stayed with me the entire drive back to the hospital. When I walked into my son's room, he smiled through the pain and whispered, "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa coming?" I forced myself to smile and lied. "They're busy today, sweetheart, but they love you." The guilt almost crushed me because I knew it wasn't true. That night, I sold the last pieces of jewelry my late husband had ever given me. I emptied my savings, maxed out my credit cards, and even started an online fundraiser that I was too embarrassed to share with anyone. Complete strangers donated more money in 48 hours than my own family had offered in a lifetime. Nurses, neighbors, old classmates, and people I had never even met sent messages saying they were praying for my son. Their kindness reminded me that family isn't always the people who share your blood. A week later, my son finally had his surgery. I sat outside the operating room for 6 endless hours, terrified every second that I might lose him. When the surgeon finally walked toward me with a smile and said, "The operation was successful," I broke down crying in the middle of the hallway. It should have been the happiest moment of my life, until later that evening. I opened Facebook and saw the photos my parents proudly posted from my sister's extravagant wedding celebration, smiling beneath the caption, "The perfect day with the whole family." I stared at those wedding photos for what felt like hours. My parents were smiling. My sister looked like a princess. And beneath every picture, people commented things like, "What a beautiful family." I wanted to scream because nobody knew that while they were dancing under crystal chandeliers, I was sleeping in a plastic hospital chair beside my son. Ethan spent the next several weeks recovering, and although the surgery saved his life, the medical bills followed us everywhere. Every month I worked overtime, skipped meals, and sold anything of value just to keep up with the payments. Then, exactly 6 months later, my aunt accidentally called me instead of my mother. During the conversation, she casually said, "I still can't believe your parents gave Olivia $300,000 as an early inheritance for her wedding." My heart stopped. $300,000. They hadn't refused because they couldn't help. They refused because they didn't want to help me. That night I requested copies of my grandmother's estate records, and everything my aunt had said was true. My parents had quietly transferred a huge portion of the inheritance to my sister only weeks after, telling me they had no money for Ethan's surgery. I didn't cry this time. Something inside me had finally gone numb. I gathered every hospital bill, every text message, every bank statement, and mailed one package to my parents with a single handwritten note inside. "You didn't lose your daughter today. You lost her the day you decided your daughter's wedding was worth more than your grandson's life." They called hundreds of times. They came to my house. My mother cried. My father apologized. And my sister insisted I was being dramatic. I never answered. Years later, Ethan is healthy, happy, and strong. He knows exactly who stood beside him when he needed it most. And it wasn't the people who shared his blood. The strangers who donated $5, the nurses who held my hand, and the friends who refused to let us fight alone became the family we never had. My parents still send birthday cards every year, but they stay unopened in a drawer because some betrayals don't heal with apologies. The day they chose a wedding over my son's life was the day they taught me the most important lesson of my life. Real family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by who shows up when your world is falling apart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.